Hi, good morning. Do you hear me well, please? Okay, thank you very much. I will start in a few minutes. Thank you. Yes, I know that. Thank you. I will wait another 2 minutes or so. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I think I sent you today what you call also the link for today's tutorial meeting. Actually, I put it at 1 o'clock. I know there are some, I don't know, maybe one or two they may find, okay, but I'm going to leave what you call the link open almost to 2:45. So if anybody coming late, I'm still will be there, okay? Okay. Do you have any question, please? Okay. Okay, I'm going to start now. I think the last thing we may, still dealing with the same main topic, what we call environmental stressors. And already I think I talked with you last time about natural disturbance. And I think we finished that section. And the last thing I mentioned to you in this regard of the natural disturbance, that just in case to, to follow up, mention about, for example, understanding the characteristic of gap phase disturbance in an old growth forest, which is basically can aid or help in the design of a selective harvesting system that mutate the natural disturbance regime. Already I mentioned that to you, and now I'm going to start today. Maybe this is more or less close to this section here under the title or subtitle Anthropogenic Disturbance. Okay, we'll talk about this one here. And this one I'm going to mention this regard here, okay? Now, that in this case I'm going to mention, number one, that a human also disturb ecosystem. Human also disturb eco systems in diverse way. Or in diverse ways, okay, which are associated associated with many human activities. Okay, such as, or for example, to mention some of these, okay. Now, one of these points, for example, harvesting of both renewable and non-renewable resources. Harvesting of both renewable and non-renewable resources often cause disturbance to ecosystems. to ecosystems. For instance, for instance, intense disturbance is caused, what is known as by strip mining. By strip mining the surface for coal or oil sand. For coal or oil sand. Just to give you an example here. The other point, for example, going to mention here, harvesting a forest okay, harvesting a forest, what you call it, by a clear cutting. By a clear cutting, okay, represent, this one represent, okay, a community replacing disturbance. A community replacing, this is replacing disturbance. Okay. Now, also the other point, for example, this is just example, silviculture management. Silvicultural management. Okay, such as, okay, a scarification of the site. Okay, scarification of the site to prepare it okay, to prepare it, for example, for planting, okay, for planting new seedlings, okay, new seedlings, or herbicide, or for example, or sorry, or herbicide spraying, okay, herbicide spraying to decrease the abundance. This is the abundance. Put it down here again. Okay, of weeds. Okay. So these are just an example, of course, of the other one I'm going to talk, for example, is the conversion of natural ecosystem into agricultural. The conversion of natural uh, ecosystem or ecosystems in this case, okay, into agricultural, okay, or urbanized land. Or urbanized land uses. Okay. And this one also to mention also represent okay a severe disturbance. Okay. The other point to mention also that a human have deliberately okay have deliberately okay or accidentally okay introduced Okay, introduced many species. Okay, many species beyond their natural ranges. Beyond their natural ranges. This is what you call, like, for example, exotic species and so on, okay? Which is basically often introduced species. Okay, species. Now, in this case, of course, these species considered to the ecosystem introduced as aliens. Okay, this basically then becomes, okay, as already you know, invasive. Okay, of natural communities. Okay, of natural communities, and of course, displacing, okay, native species, okay, and causing other kind of ecological damage, and causing other kinds of ecological, okay, damage. All right. Of course, going to give you some example of this one here. Some of the example, maybe you know it already, but just to mention some example. Okay. Uh, for example, going to mention some of these examples here. That basically in this is in North America. Okay, as already maybe you heard about what you call the introduction of the zebra mussels. Okay, zebra mussel, basically, just to give you their Latin name, called Dracaena polymorpha. This is E here. Okay. This is Y. Okay. Into the Great Lakes. Okay. Also become what you call the introduction. Also the introduction, as a matter of fact, of what you call, if you also maybe heard about it, purple loses truffle. Turf, sorry, loses turf. Okay, which is basically the Latin name for this species, and in the end becomes a very severe, what you call, invasive species. Okay, Lithium silicaria, that's the number of the species. Lithium, okay, silicaria, okay, into the woodland. or into wetlands. Okay. And also the other example about this bird, which is known as starling. Okay. Also introduction. Okay. Of starling. Okay. Which is basically the Latin name for it is Strunus vulgaris. Okay. And also at the same time, and also the introduction of starling and domestic pigeons. And domestic pigeons. Okay, give me a second here so that we have another page here. Okay. Pigeons. Okay. Just a minute, the domestic pigeons here. This is D. Okay. And the species or the Latin name for the domestic pigeon is Columbia livia. Of course, these have been introduced basically into urban areas. Okay. Did you finish on this one? Okay, I'm going to move it now here. If you just let me know. And also the other thing which causes disturbance, basically the warfare. Okay, to mention this point here, that warfare, okay, also basically produces a wide range of community replacing. Okay, of replacing and also and micro disturbances. And also and micro disturbances, of course, as you know, through explosions and movement of heavy machinery. To mention, okay, through explosions, okay, and movement of heavy machinery, okay, over the landscape. Okay. So these are basically some of the example of what you call of some introducing of what you call the alien species or species beyond their range and become almost or what you call them sometimes like exotic species, okay, in general or other things here. Now going to the final thing I want to talk about in this regard, certain called environmental toxicology. Subtitle: Okay. Now, this one basically in the environmental toxicology, simply what it is, it examines environmental factors. Okay. Mental. Okay, it examines environmental factors that can influence. Okay, that can influence. Okay, the exposure. Okay, of organisms. Okay, to potentially. Okay, toxic chemicals. Okay. Now, just to mention some of the important topics, basically, in this what we call environmental toxicology. To mention this point here, that important topics in environmental toxicology. In environmental uh, toxicology. I'll just give you some example here. As the following, for example, of course, these are just few examples. Okay, such as, for example, the cycling and transport of potentially toxic chemical. The cycling and transport, okay, of potentially toxic chemicals. Okay. Other point I'm going to mention, for example, and also to mention this point, and also their transformation of these toxic chemical, okay, okay, into other substances. Their transformation into other substances. Okay. And also to mention the other point, for example, the determination. The determination of sinks. Sink in this regard, basically here, it means where these, what you call, chemicals may accumulate. Determination of sinks, where chemicals, okay, may accumulate, okay, in a high concentration, okay, in a high concentration, of course, also including, of course, within the bodies of organisms, you know, as it would go to basically in that case to follow what you call, in other words, the web food and so on, okay, including within the bodies of organisms. Sorry, including, okay, sorry about that, within the bodies of organisms. Now, also what happened here, sometime, of course, when you have these chemical, as I'm going to discuss it in other section, that sometimes they will react and produce other toxic material in the environment. To make it just simply this, a complex factor influences, to mention this point here, complex, okay, of factors influences okay, influences what you call the ecotoxicology, influences what you call the toxicological toxicological, okay, risks associated, okay, with exposure, okay, to chemicals in the environment, okay, in the environment. uh, that's what happened basically. Some of these uh, what you call, to mention some of the, for example, some of the most important factor, for example, that which is affect sometimes called biological sensitivity. The other one, for example, the intersenic toxicity, okay, the okay, the intrinsic toxicity, okay, of the chemicals being considered, okay, and also to discuss, for example, the intensity, okay, of the exposure, okay, and any indirect effect, and any indirect effects that might cause. of course. Okay. So these are basically only a few, of course, point we mentioned about the anthropogenic of environmental toxicology here. Okay. By this, basically, as a matter of fact, I try to cover this point to some extent, what you call to the environmental stressor. And of course, yourself, you may also, you read here and there about, what occurs. Okay. Now I'm going to move to another section. Now, do you have any question, please? Okay. And now the other also factor going to cause, which cause in the environment at the moment, okay, which is basically about the water. So we're going to start a new section here. Also, okay. Just give me a second here. Okay. I'm going to start a new topics, okay, because as you can see, I'm touching on different subjects here. We are going to talk now about the water resources and water pollution. What now here? Okay, water resources and water pollution. Okay. Now, of course, to ask our question or self-question all the time, we find basically in many parts of the world, of course, they have what you call a short supply of fresh water, and also the other point here, people in general, of course, as you know, and only to mention, they manage fresh water really very, very poorly. Okay, by many ways. To mention this one now, just to talk a little bit about in general here, of course, to mention this point here now. Of course, our planet is unique. Did you finish from this one? Okay, I'm going to put it here so that it was more, all right. Now, under this what you call water resources and water pollution, our planet is unique. Okay, because of a precious layer okay, of water and of course, as you know, the majority of the most bulk of what is the saline water, which is of the ocean and the seas and so on, which is constitute more or less about 71% of the surface. To mention this point here, water, and most of it okay, salt water. Okay, mention this point, covering about 71% of its surface means over the planet. Okay, covering about 71% of its surface. Now, as already we know or mentioned at this point here, that water okay, is unusual compound okay, is unusual compound with the properties, okay, with the properties that keep, of course, as you know, that keep humans and every other species alive. Okay. Of course, as already know, for example, that a person or mission that, of course, one could survive. Okay, just give me a second here. One could survive for several weeks without food. Okay. But of course, as you know, but only a few days without fresh water. Okay. And simply to mention, of course, very simple fact, as already you know, basically there is no substitute. Okay. For this vital form of natural capital. The other point going to mention in this regard, I guess, that of course access to clean fresh water, okay, is important, okay, is important, okay, to human health and economies, okay, of course, as well as to national and global security and the environment. Okay. Now, the other point going to mention in this regard, basically what you call the World Health Organization, which is known as WHO. Okay, estimates, okay, an average, okay, an average of This is an average, of course, of 4,400 people die each day. Okay, from called water-borne infections or infectious diseases. Okay, because basically what happened, they don't have an access to safe drinking water. Diseases, simply to mention here, because they lack, okay, access to safe drinking water. Okay. Now, of course, no need to mention here that, of course, fresh water is also very important for the economy because, as you know, no agriculture, nothing, everything has to be done with water. To mention to you this point. Second, okay, when access to fresh water, okay, is an economic issue. Okay, because water, as you know, is vital for producing food and energy, okay, for producing food and energy, and also basically reducing poverty, as well as reducing poverty. Okay. The other thing going to mention with this regard, of course, that of course access to fresh water now becoming more or less national and also becoming a security issue. To mention this point here. Third, okay, access to fresh water is national and global security issue. And always we expect also in the future going to be quite many conflict basically as the resources of fresh water getting less and less and less. And to mention this point here, global security, okay, issue because of increasing tensions within and between nations, okay, over the limited freshwater resources, over the limited fresh water resources they share. Okay. Now, also in addition to that, the other important issue, basically, it is, of course, environmental issue. Going to mention this point. Also mention this point here that finally, that water is an environmental issue. Environmental issue, as already going to mention that excessive withdrawal of water, excessive withdrawal of water from rivers and aquifers, from rivers and aquifers has resulted in a dwindling. I'm going to continue here. Just give me a second here. And called and dwindling. Rivers and also shrinking lakes, and disappearing wetland. And I'm going to continue here. Just give me a second. Shrinking lakes, and as I mentioned, and disappearing wetlands. In addition to that, of course, use and so on. Of course, plus to that, we add now weather pollution taking place also at the same time, to mention this point here. Now, this is in combination. This is in combination with water pollution, in many areas of the world. In many areas of the world, of course, what happened has degraded water quantity, if you finish from this one, I'm going to move it now here, this last one here. Let's look for this one here. Of water quantity. And in addition to that, of course, resulted, as a matter of fact, and also it has also resulted what they call in reducing fish population, especially we're going to talk about that in the fresh water. And to mention this point, it has also reduced fish populations okay, and also that basically increased or hastened, okay, hastened the extinction, okay, of some aquatic species, okay, and at the same time we mention and degraded, as a matter of fact, and degraded aquatic ecosystem services, and degraded aquatic eco system, okay, services. So basically, this is giving us just some perspective here. Now we're going to talk, we have a subtitle, okay, to mention this subtitle, most of Earth's, most of Earth's freshwater is not available. Okay. And this will be talk about the different area where it's freshwater and which one is available and which one is not available, and to mention this point here. Now, in general, we talk about only about 0.2, only about 0.024%, okay, of the planet's water supply okay, is available to people as a liquid fresh water. Is available to people, okay, as liquid fresh water. Now, of course, as you know, we're going to mention the two main system here. Now, to mention, of course, that this water, okay, is found, as you know, in lakes, rivers, and streams. Okay. And of course, the other one, which is basically the accessible, some of the underground deposit, and accessible, okay, underground, okay, deposits. Okay. Now, of course, we have the other one, which is we call that surface runoff water. The surface runoff, we call this is another source. Okay. And now, simply, of course, really the fortunate for us, as a matter of fact, basically, most of the purification of the water occur simply what is known as in the nature hydrological cycle, to mention this point here. Now, fortunately, fresh water, okay, is continually recycled, okay, recycled, purified, okay, purified and distributed, okay, in Earth's hydrological cycle. Okay. Yeah, this is a simple figure, of course, that basically would simply illustrate in a simple way, basically what you call the hydrological cycle. Okay. I don't know if you want to take a picture of it or anything else here, or you can find it somewhere else, but basically that just to illustrate it very simply. Okay. Now, simply to mention, of course, mention that this irrepressible, we call this irrepressible water recycling, okay, and purification, okay, works well, simply to mention, on its own. Okay. Now, of course, what happened here, that system is going to be disturbed or affected when there is a heavy pollution occurrence on automation. The system begins to fail. Okay. When the cycle, okay, when the cycle is altered, or overloaded, with pollutant, okay, or overdrawn. Okay. And also going to mention one point, of course, what you call global warming or temperature, that also affect what you call the normal hydrological cycle, to mention this point here. Now, global atmospheric warming. Okay, global atmospheric warming alters, okay, the water cycle. Okay, of course, what happened here, by evaporating more water into the atmosphere. Into the atmosphere. And basically, just to mention some of the phenomena as a result of this. Okay, so basically mention as a result. Okay, as a result, wet places. Okay, see more frequent. They will see more frequent and heavier flooding. And heavier flooding. Okay, and also to mention and dry places. Okay, experience. Okay, a more intense drought. Okay, storms. And the storms, as a matter of fact, can be more forceful. Okay. Now, the other point I'm going to mention to you here in this before, okay, still I have a, okay. The other point I'm going to mention here that, okay, that simply that groundwaters, because basically groundwater, that was present the real source of the fresh water. To mention that groundwaters, talk about it, okay, which is basically to mention that in the groundwater, much of Earth's fresh water, I'm going to continue here, okay, is stored. Okay, in the ground. Okay, give me a second here. Okay. This one here. In the ground. Now, just to talk after that here, okay? To make sure, and also continue that. So the fresh water in these underground spaces, okay? The fresh water in these underground spaces, okay? And basically that was known as the groundwater, which is called the groundwater. It's known as the groundwater. okay, and basic information, it is, okay, a key component a key component of Earth's of Earth natural capital, means from the water, okay, Earth natural capital, okay. Now to mention a few lines here in this regard, okay. Now the spaces in soil and rocks, the spaces, okay, in soil and rocks here, okay, close to Earth, to Earth's surface, okay, hold little moisture, okay, hold little moisture. However, of course, below a certain depth, okay, which we call the zone of saturation. Okay, certain depth, which is known as is the zone of saturation. Now, these spaces, okay, are completely filled, okay, with fresh water. Now, simply we call the top of the groundwater zone, okay, the top of the groundwater zone, that is what we call it, what we call the water table, is we finish from this one here. I'm going to put it back here, and this one here. Just give me a second. Okay. That basically, if you can see this one here, how to visualize it. It is like this one, okay, because that shows to us what you call the water stored basically in underground in the cracks and pores, and basically that we have basically that area which is we call little moisture, we call unsaturated zone, and then gradually we reach here basically to the what's known as the water table surface, and then of course we reach to the groundwater. Now later on, when you reach to the area which is known as the fracture to aquifers, that is of course is not available for us. Okay, so this is basically how it works out. I'm going to talk about FEB later on. Okay. Did you follow this, please? Okay, now talk about this here. Now, usually in general, I'm going to mention, of course, that the water table, yeah, The water table, of course, will become moisture and rainy, the water table will rise. Okay. Now, the water table, okay, rise in wet weather. In wet weather, and of course, it goes down in the dry wood, okay? And the water table, very simple to mention here, okay, falls in the dry weather, or of course, or when people, okay, remove groundwater faster than nature. This is faster, okay, than nature can replenish it. Okay. And that's why basically going to mention this later on. And that's why basically when you reach to urbanization, this road, car, all that is of course going to reduce as a matter of fact percolation of the water to the groundwater. Okay, we're going to mention that later on. Now, of course, deeper than that, we call what we call the aquiferous water, or we call sometimes the geological layer. To mention this point here. Now, deeper down, I show it you as okay, lie was known as the geological layers, which is called the one I mentioned to known as the Aquifers. Okay. And simply to mention basically that Aquifers, okay, are underground okay, caverns and porous layer and porous layers of sand, okay, gravel or rock, okay. And just to mention this regard, we call some caverns, we call it cavern, have rivers, of groundwater, okay, of groundwater flowing through them. Groundwater flowing, okay, through them, okay. And simply to mention here that one point that watertight layers of rock, water tight layers Okay, watertight layers of rock or a clay below aquifers. First, keep fresh water. Okay, keep fresh water from sinking deeper into earth. Deeper into earth. Okay. Now, of course, talk a little about this one here. I have here a few minutes left. And to mention, of course, as you know, usually we use pump and other thing to bring the groundwater up. To mention this point here, pumps bring groundwater. Okay, to the surface, and basically we can use it for many things, simply for irrigation. The other thing we mentioned is simply supplying households and simply meeting, okay, the needs of industry. Okay. I think I'm going to stop my lecture here at the moment. Going to talk about all this different part, and also going to talk about different factors about dams, their advantage, their disadvantage, what they will do, all that. Okay, to cover all that area. So I stop my lecture here at the moment. I hope did you follow it? Okay, please. Do you have any question, please? No questions? Okay. I guess I say the midterm is going to be on Friday, March the 5th. Okay. Yeah, I didn't send you. I'm going to send you an email with this regard. Okay. Yeah, because I left it on Friday. Basically, it gives you more time, I guess. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. All right. As I mentioned today, we're going to meet at 1 o'clock. But as I mentioned, I'm keeping what you call the Zoom is almost open till almost till 2:45. And I think some people may be late. They go for work. So basically, I'm waiting for them. And if they have a special time suitable, please let me know. Okay? Any more questions? Okay, then. Well, have a good weekend and hope everything is okay.